Hello, thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm Nicole Zafian and I'm the head of content at CLOC. We're thrilled to bring you today's Solution Lab, Reinventing eDiscovery with our presenting sponsor, IPRO. Before we get started, I just want to point out a couple of things to help you get the most out of today's session. So on the platform, you'll notice several boxes and tools. We have a chat feature, which you can use to chat with each other as attendees and also share your thoughts and feedback to what the presenters are saying. And then we have our Q&A feature, which Nick and James will be responding to your questions throughout the presentation. So feel free to use that box to send any questions that you have for them. Or if you're having any tech issues, I'll be on the line as well and can respond in that Q&A box. And again, we also have resources. So slides and a handout from IPRO are available in the resources box for you to download on your screen as well. And we are recording today's session, so you'll be able to come back and rewatch at any time with a link that will be sent out following today's session. With that, I want to, again, welcome you all for joining us, and thank you. And thank you to our amazing sponsor, IPRO, for putting together this presentation. With that, I'll hand it off to IPRO's Director of Information Governance, Nick Inglis. Nick?
Thank you, Nicole. It's really great to be here. I know James and myself, we're thrilled to have you join us, folks, for this innovative session talking about the ways that eDiscovery is currently going through a reinvention. Some of the thought processes that we're working through here at IPRO as we solve problems upstream as opposed to Band-Aid solutions. We've had enough of those, right? I'd like to welcome my co-presenter for today's session. He is Environmental Chemicals Corporation's Corporate Counsel, James P. Laurie III. Welcome, James.
Thanks.
And I'm Nick Inglis. I am the Director of Information Governance at IPRO. Prior to joining IPRO earlier this year, I was leading the thought leadership for ARMA International, the primary records management and information governance association in the world. Found myself at ARMA because the organization that I was leading up, the Information Coalition and Information Governance Conference, was acquired by ARMA International. Now I'm very, very happy to be here at IPRO. Before any further ado, let's simply dive into our subject today. Jim, do you want to take this discussion here?
Okay. Has the slide advanced? Sorry. Okay.
Perfect. There it is.
eDiscovery has constantly reinvented itself by looking to related disciplines and repurposing some of their best practices. There are a lot of examples of this selective borrowing. For example, the classification structures that we rely on come from folks working in document management and early enterprise content management. Redaction also comes from document management. Preservation and disposition comes from records management. Processing, review, and production come from the audit and compliance disciplines. As we look toward reinventing eDiscovery today, the obvious option for us to generate ideas is to do as our predecessors did, which is look to related principles. In this session, Nick and I will discuss looking forward at a variety of advancements across many disciplines. The discipline that has gained the most traction in the recent years is that of information governance, and today we'll be looking towards information governance as a source of inspiration.
And we'll also need a grounding element by which we can evaluate our evolution or reinvention. And for this, we look to the common model that most professionals in both eDiscovery as well as information governance at least have some familiarity with, and that's the EDRM, or Electronic Discovery Reference Model. On the left of this model is information governance, as represented by the IGRM, or Information Governance Reference Model. And to the right is eDiscovery, as represented by the classic EDRM. And we'll start by evaluating both disciplines. So we're just going to look right now at only the eDiscovery portion of the EDRM, but we've aligned it vertically as opposed to horizontally. So you'll recognize it. It looks a little different, but it takes up a bit less screen space for us. Let's run a typical case through this process. And we'll start with some data, and then our data essentially just works its way through the classic EDRM process. And the classic EDRM process is an 8-step non-linear process. Occasionally we miss a keyword or a concept or a custodian upon reflecting on the data. And what do? We go back to collection. And there goes your cost containment measures. But let's fast forward to the end here. And at the end of any case, you end up with insights. And those insights are gleaned along the way by reviewers or other people that are involved in this classic EDRM process, most often by the reviewers. And where do those types of insights go? What I'm talking about here, let's use an example. So for example, as you're going through the review process, you come across a folder filled with PII, personally identifiable information. Now, as an outside reviewer, currently there's not really much incentive for you to share with the company that you're working on behalf of that there even is any PII. It's really out of scope of what you're trying to achieve at the time. So right now, if you gain insights in this process, which you inevitably do, because you're looking at organizational information, where do those insights go? Essentially, those insights right now go nowhere. Jim, before enacting the latest version of IPRO, did any outside counsel ever send you insights about your organizational data? Is this those insights, did they ever get passed back to you?
No, we never got insights from anybody. And I mean, the whole process is trying to winnow it down and cull as opposed to cherry picking information that's relevant for us. So I discussed with you, Nick, before that after we amass our data, we do a dirty word search just to see where the flashpoints are and if there's anything that when we send it over, it's going to be colorful in depositions. So, and it's amazing what happens when you do a dirty word search. And that would be an insight that somebody could send us, but no one's ever done that before.
No, it doesn't really happen in this environment, but those insights can be incredibly valuable to the company that you're serving, but you don't often get that. A few more insights with this process here. It's got three here. First off, cost controls. I mentioned that in passing there, but the distance between collect and analyze in the classic EDRM, the greater the distance is there, the costs are going to just increase. So the greater the distance between collect and analyze, or if you have to go back to collection again, the higher the costs are going to be. Secondly, this process, there's not much of a difference between using this process for paper or using this process for electronic information. And at this point, whenever we have paper that we need to bring into this process, most of the time we are scanning it or digitizing it in some way and making it electronic information to get it to work in our electronic workflows. So let's get rid of the concept of paper for a bit and take advantage of some of these advancements that we've had in technology over the past 2 decades. If we're to think about those advancements, where does that lead us? That's going to be a very interesting thought later in this presentation. And then a last one here. Why are companies sending so much information and sending them to outside counsel, outside firms, in every other business process within our enterprises? Sending massive volumes of information is generally viewed as a massive privacy and security risk because you're literally giving your information to an outside company and trusting that they're going to give the same care and feeding to that information as you have over the years. But that's just not necessarily always the case. So what companies have done is they try to minimize the amount of information that they're sending, or try some other techniques to avoid sending the information in the first place. What if we re-engineered this process? And can we re-engineer it from the start, or is it something that we just have to accept? Well, clearly we can re-engineer the process and move ourselves forward. But let's see about this. Jim, do you want to talk about some educated guesses here?
Well, before we reinvent eDiscovery, and it seems like eDiscovery reinvents itself every 2 to 5 years anyway for the past 15 years. We can make some educated guesses on where we go in the short term. Information governance side of the discussion. As a quick catch up for folks who may still be new to the term or discipline, information governance is the highest level direction setting and strategy for all organizational information. Information governance professionals focus on reducing the risk of information while also ensuring the value of information is unlocked. Risk reduction often has a basis in records management, privacy, and security, while value increasing is often seated in process improvement, data science, and ensuring findability of information through taxonomy improvement and search improvement. In the EDRM, we're given this representation of information governance, the IGRM. We just evaluated eDiscovery as a process, and this representation makes for a difficult comparison because it is not a process. It helps us understand stakeholders and a bit of the goals of information governance, but it doesn't show us a process. So we need a process for information governance.
Yeah, so we looked at some other processes that exist out there, and some other views of information governance. And the first one that we looked at was a bit obvious for me, since it's one that I created. It's the ARMA Information Governance Implementation Model. And I'm obviously a bit biased, but I'm quite fond of this model. This is really a great model for benchmarking your program or establishing a new information governance program. It's a really helpful tool for that. But again, this is not a process-oriented view of information governance. And we just evaluated eDiscovery based on process. We want to evaluate information governance in terms of process, but the more we searched for a model that was a process-oriented model for information governance, the more frustrating it became that, frankly, there isn't one. Right now, there has been no information governance process-oriented model. So we created one based on what we truly saw out there happening in the market. And everything within the realm of information governance essentially falls into three categories of activities. And generally they tend to be linear with, first activities happening within the strategic alignment, the strategically aligned category. And this is where you essentially align your information intentions, what you intend to do with your information, with the policies and practices that you're building within your information governance program. This is going to also have a lot of defining of your eDiscovery processes that are specific to your organization, along with policy on security, privacy, business processes, records, and any other disciplines that you have that utilize information. So for example, if you have content management or web content management, you'd have some alignment process in here to understand their practices with their information so that you can align and have one organizational viewpoint across all organizational information. And information governance serves as your umbrella of information policies and practices. And so it must start with understanding what policies and practices you have in place today.
Yeah, and next, in most programs, you see folks run a lot of one-time projects when necessary for your organization. Usually these are in response to an issue or an information challenge, and we'll talk about the types of one-time projects that folks are performing in just a moment. Our last box here in this model is continuous improvement. And in mature programs, you see information governance drive continuous improvement through the application of the automation.
Brilliant. And let's move those over to the side so that we can dive deeper and have some room on the page here to dive deeper into the IG side of this, information governance, so that we can understand it better and apply its learning to eDiscovery. So what exactly are we strategically aligning with? What are the things that you see in organizations, across organizations, that you should be aligning with? And breaking this down, here are the most common things that folks are out there aligning with as they're creating or growing and maturing their IG programs. And it's things like your corporate governance above you, to document strategy if you have a document management or department that has guiding documents around their policies and practices, Legal operations come into play here, understanding those and how they interact with information. If you're in government or the like, you'd look to FOIA and other, right to know type laws and whatever you have within your organization as alignment points. You may have these, you may have some of these, you may even have some others that are specific to your discipline. Above is alignment with corporate governance, and then you take those tenets, translate them specifically, apply them to information, and draw together all of your existing information policies as they exist within each subdiscipline, and you align. This surely isn't the easiest task. It's not the task that's the most thankful task in the organization, but it's also often the most valuable information work that an organization can undertake, because you're truly understanding your information environment. And you can repurpose this work in conjunction with IT, in conjunction with all of the other disciplines. And the results can be repurposable and useful as guidance at the start of almost every information project going forward.
When it comes to one-time projects, they're often in support of the various disciplines, and in this way, IG serves as a strategic aligner of disciplines and a support arm for other information disciplines. The most common projects that IPRO sees out there are as being attributable to information governance are shown here.
Yeah, and each of these projects that are shown on the screen under the blue box of one-time projects, IPRO has that within our tool set as supported projects by our tools. But these are the most common projects that you see out there that people are attributing to information governance. And, as James said earlier, mature programs tend not only to have those one-time projects, but they also, they tend to apply automation. And we categorize this automation as continuous improvement. It gets applied in the background, invisibly, and common automation areas. It's things like information access and controls. It's things monitoring and scanning that you have going on in the background in support of other disciplines like privacy, searching for PII across your organization on an ongoing basis, so that whenever new PII appears, you can be made aware of it. Automation in report generation is another one we commonly see. Wouldn't it be nice to just have those reports automatically generate on a monthly basis? And then there's also a lot of other things that our tool supports beyond just these common automation projects, things like pushing out common folders or labels into Outlook environments. Things that are not frequently utilized, but are also within our tool set, because when you need them, they're convenient to have. Compressing that back down to our three primary areas. When you see those three boxes, keep thinking about those items that they represent as we draw information governance and eDiscovery back together again.
We talked about two of the primary goals of information governance earlier: reducing information risk and increasing information value. So if we look at that in the context of eDiscovery, we can find a lot of alignment with information governance, most specifically in risk reduction. The other two goals we wanted to highlight are the ongoing improvement of information-related processes through increased efficiency, looking at the speed and bottlenecks that may exist in processes, as well as the outcomes or the process efficacy. Each of these lower goals also deeply align with eDiscovery, or rather, it should. Historically, we often aren't looking at eDiscovery in terms of improving efficiency or efficacy, but going forward, I think we'll use these as key metrics on eDiscovery processes in the future. Using those lenses, let's go back to the EDRM eDiscovery process. Starting off at the top, how can we improve our efficiency? What if we take the collection phase and have that happen automatically behind the scenes while we're analyzing? These aren't pieces of paper anymore, they're digital, and we can perform multiple steps at the same time by leveraging the technology.
Yeah, Jim, I love that. We don't have to, because it's not paper, perform these steps in the ways that we used to. It used to be you'd walk to your file room, wherever you kept your information, you'd pull a piece of paper out of a folder, and you'd review it quickly, and you'd collect it by putting it in a box. And then you'd walk that box down the hallway, hand it off to someone else, and that would be your preservation. Again, we can do this with a click of a button on digital items. There's no reason for us to create these as separate process steps anymore. How about preservation? We can have that happen behind the scenes as we identify. Again, we don't need to walk to that file room and down the hall to another professional. It's not paper. We're talking about digital objects. And it's pretty easy to say, hey, I found this thing, I've collected it, let's hold on to it, just in one step.
Yeah, and processing, one of IPRO's claims to fame over the past 30 years or so, they're pushing that even further by making even more of that happen behind the scenes and needing as little human intervention as possible. By having it happen behind the scenes during identification and analyzing.
Yeah, we do that by leveraging some of these newer advanced technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning, and active learning. With the recent IPRO acquisition of Zylab, we are looking to push these capabilities even further and really drive new efficiencies in this stage that we haven't really seen before and haven't been able to accomplish before. Now, I know we've created a football plan here of a mess, but as we look at this 8-step non-linear process in the context of information governance, we can push it to become a 5-step, mostly linear process. And this is how we represent it graphically. Let's see. Remember when we talked about the making copies, sending them to outside counsel, and trying to do as little of that as possible with as small a volume as possible and as late in the game as possible, so that we can really assure our privacy and security much more strongly. Here's how we're enabling that. You look to the top of that provisioned and limited access for your partners.
In the IPRO world, the new capabilities are called Live EDA or Live Early Data Assessment. We just received that capability here at ECC a few weeks ago. I've taken it for a quick test spin so far, and I'm excited to utilize in our next case, and it's going to drive further efficiencies for us. And it will help drive greater security and privacy assuredness.
Yeah, this is really a new capability that we have just been rolling out to our customers recently. Live EDA essentially gives limited access and connection into your system so that you're in control of the access. You're managing the access, not just handing over your information. And you do that in a limited scope so that your workflow innately assures privacy and security much more strongly, because you're simply sending a smaller volume at the time when you actually need to send that volume. I was reading a piece, and in that piece it said, something like 70% of cases where information is shifted off to outside counsel never actually get reviewed. I'll try and find that and tweet it out later. But it was something like higher than 70%. So you really want to limit sending that information until you really know that you absolutely have to. And you can perform those early case assessment steps, not needing to push that information out to outside counsel by focusing on relevance. And this shortened process, by leveraging modern technology, allows you to save for each case more time, more money, and it increases your ability to find relevant information upfront. And whenever you're moving forward, I like to say, you've got to provide access to the folks who are the later adopters. Adoption of new technologies, it's always a bell curve. So while we're driving forward these new ways of working together, these new paths of working together, we also have to be cognizant that there are many people who are still living in the classic model, the 20th century instead of the 21st century. So our goal when we're doing this is to really create pathways for folks to try these new capabilities, to make them a part of their workflow while not forcing anybody into a specific way of doing this.
Based on your comment for the 20th century people, it's not all attorneys are Luddites, but most of us are dinosaurs with regard to technology. So this is the new vision for eDiscovery, but where it gets really interesting is when we bring together eDiscovery with information governance. Now let's talk about how tools like IPRO are building out in the short term to help bring your IG and eDiscovery programs together. This is where Nick likes to say the secret sauce is, and where you can gain economies of scale by leveraging the power of the two disciplines in conjunction with one another.
All right, secret sauce time, right? So let's, lost the slide there. Let's use our IPRO tools to look at an example. And on the left, and the IPRO tools come in to bound things here. On the left is information governance. On the right is eDiscovery. And in the middle, we're going to talk about things in terms of the concept of insights. All right, let's look at a new case here that you're dealing with on the eDiscovery side. Actually, let's say it's the exact same case as earlier, where we found that folder full of PII. And didn't have anywhere for that insight to go. Obviously, in this new model, the case moves faster because it's no longer using the outdated method. You're skipping steps by piling up together here, and at the it's moving faster, and you're harnessing the capabilities of the technology. And at the end of the case, wherever it ends, you have insights. In this case, you have the PII insight. So where does that insight go? With us, and hopefully with other technology providers who are starting to provide these capabilities as well, the IPRO technology helps to step in and create a new inflection point between the disciplines, giving you alerts so that the IG professional can then follow up on the learning from eDiscovery, even if that learning is happening from an outside service provider. So those insights will then help the IG professional optimize their information environment. They take that learning, they take it and they utilize it in whichever stage they're in with their program, and then they optimize their information environment. And as you optimize, you're minimizing the overall information within your information environment. So when you are starting your next case, you're essentially starting with that optimized information. And it ends up drawing the two disciplines closer together so that over time, you end up saving more time, more money, and you're continuing to optimize your information environment so that you're not starting with the whole world of information. In our example, we found that pool of PII. The next time you're reviewing information, that pool of PII will be dealt with by your IG professionals. This has really some incredible implications, not just in eDiscovery and IG, but also beyond that for privacy professionals. A privacy professional would love to take advantage of the learning that there's a folder full of PII out there. And the IG professional simply takes care of it, making the privacy professional more successful, making the security professional more successful. Also, it helps your information management, ECM, or document management, whichever of those you have in your organizational, within your org chart of departments. It helps make the information that you have easier to browse to. It makes the information that you have easier to search for because you've gotten rid of the chaff from the wheat. You gain new efficiency at all levels of your organization by moving into this model. And that's what we're starting to see right now. Again, these are new advancements that we are pushing out to our customers as we speak. Some of this that we've talked about, the alerts, for example, that's something that's coming in a very near future release. So we're really talking about the borderline here. What you've built in this process is unified information governance in eDiscovery. That's been something that, as an information governance subject matter expert like myself, it's what's got me so excited about how IPRO is driving advancement. This has all been elusive to this point, but we're driving organizations forward by leveraging our technology in the background to enable IG success, which is also enabling eDiscovery success. I like that, Jim. How about you?
Yes, we are a new client for IPRO, and I've had the opportunity to learn firsthand that when they hear it's always been that way, they reject that. I need somebody as a vendor who's not going to accept the way things are done previously and come up with new ways.
Yeah, and at IPRO, we're trained and disciplined in this, in questioning absolutely everything about our underlying processes and working to take challenges upstream to solve them, not just treating the symptoms, but really focusing on the issues and providing a solution here. It's always been that way is just an unacceptable statement at IPRO. You will get your hand slapped gently. It doesn't have to be any way in particular. We are creating the discipline of eDiscovery collectively. So we are the ones who have to define our collective future of our disciplines. We don't have to wait for someone else to do that for us. And then I like to end things with this quote. Jim, do you want to give us this quote here?
Catherine Booth, now recognized as the co-founder of the Salvation Army, had this quote, and you'll hear it from time to time in IPRO presentations. The term she uses is disturb instead of disrupt, and that's apt for us. You don't want to disrupt the law. You just want to disturb it enough that it evolves into a better version of itself.
Yeah, I like that a lot. And I put it at the end of a lot of presentations because you really don't want to disrupt the law. No one wants to disrupt what you're doing. We really just want to give you a pathway to do the things that you're doing better and to give you the motivation to take advantage of the capabilities that you have at your disposal. That can be disturbing. That's what the future of IG and eDiscovery is going to look like in our vision. And we're both proud to be carving our way into this future. I'd love to review any questions that let's see. I've got a question here. Where does the IG summary come from? Yes, it's question from Michael. Where does the IG summary come from? It'd be useful to have that as a reference. Yes, so it's something that we developed at IPRO as a model for information governance. We actually created that ourselves. I currently have our graphics design team working on a beautiful glossy version of it that we'll be sharing out at IPRO in the coming weeks. But right now it's not available anywhere. You're going to have to stay tuned with us, Michael, and we'll be releasing that so that everybody can have access to it soon. I appreciate that question. And checking in on the chat, if anyone has any questions, glad to answer any that you may have. Right.
This is a quiet group.
It is a quiet group. We planned ready for Q&A, but honestly, I think everybody may be a bit Zoom fatigued at this point. If you come up with a question later in the day because you're really just digesting the things that James and I have been talking about, feel free to send us an email or connect with us on LinkedIn. I know both of us would likely be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Yeah, my email is jlaurie, spelled Laurie, at ecc.net. I didn't realize I wasn't going to have a background here, so you get my dull home office. So I'm so accustomed to the home background glazing over everything for me.
The beautiful sunlight. All right, seeing no additional questions, I just want to thank everybody for their time today, and I hope you were able to take a lot from the presentation. And I do want to thank our hosts at CLOC and Nicole. It's been wonderful to work with you in developing this topic and bringing it to the community. It means a lot that you're able to work with vendors like IPRO and bring some thought leadership to the community.
Well, thank you both so much, and thank you to IPRO for sponsoring today's session and for sharing this extremely valuable information. Like they said, you guys can connect with both Nick and James if you have any other questions or any other thoughts, but it's been a great session.
Thanks, Nicole. Thanks to the attendees.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Have a good day.